The barn door slammed open, and cold wind rushed in with 15 dusty cowboys. Mutha Cullah stood at the stove, stirring a pot of beans, when Sullah's refkti banged his fist on the long wooden table. 300 head to Miller's Crossing, he shouted. We ride at dawn. The men cheered. Jade Turner threw his hat in the air. Nobody looked at Mutha. Nobody ever did. She set down her spoon. Her hands, rough and red from hot water, trembled just a little. She had smelled the wind that morning. It carried a strange, sharp smell, like metal and ice mixed together. She had seen this smell only once before, in Dakota Territory, the winter a storm buried a whole wagon train. Mutha walked forward, right into the middle of the loud, laughing men. She did something nobody expected. She grabbed the big supply list off the table and threw it into the fire. The room went silent. "Woman, have you gone mad?" Sullahs roared, his face turning red. The younger cowboys laughed, slapping their knees. "Old Mutha's finally lost her mind," one boy said. But Mutha did not laugh. She did not look afraid either. She stood tall, flour still on her apron, and looked Sullahs straight in the eye. "Don't go tomorrow," she said, her voice flat and hard. "A big storm is coming. I can smell it." Jade Turner spat on the floor. "She's a cook, Sullahs, not a weather man." Sullahs stepped closer to her, his boots heavy on the wood floor. "You've got some nerve, woman, burning my supply list like that." Mutha did not move back. "I've buried a man in snow before and dug him out alive," she said quietly. "I know what that smell means." Nobody answered her. The men only stared, some smirking, some confused, all of them certain that the cook had finally said too much. Sullahs turned away first. "Rewrite the list," he snapped. "We ride at dawn regardless." The wind hit the ranch house like a fist. Mutha stood at the window, watching snow turn the world white in seconds. She counted the hours since the men left. 2 days. They should have reached Miller's Crossing by now, but her stomach felt tight and cold, colder than the kitchen air. She grabbed her shawl and ran outside. "Get every horse in the barn," she shouted at the stable boys. "Now move." The boys froze, staring at her. Nobody had heard her shout like that before. "Did you not hear me?" Mutha yelled, her voice cutting through the wind. "Move those horses or we lose them all." They ran. Old Amos grabbed straw and cloth, stuffing it into cracks in the barn walls just as Mutha ordered. Nobody questioned her anymore. Something in her face had changed. It scared them more than the storm did. By nightfall, the wind screamed like a wounded animal. The temperature dropped so fast that water froze in the buckets within minutes. Mutha stood by the fire, but her mind was 40 miles north, on 15 men and 300 cattle caught somewhere in that killing whiteness. She pulled a heavy buffalo coat from her old trunk. Amos's eyes went wide. "Mrs. Cullah, what are you doing?" "Going to find them," Mutha said, tying rope around her waist. "You'll die out there." Amos grabbed her arm. Mutha pulled free, calm and firm. "I've lived through worse than this. Keep the fire high, keep the door shut." "And if you don't come back?" Amos asked, his voice shaking. "Then don't come looking," Mutha said, "just live." She tied the other end of the rope to the porch post, the same trick her husband once taught her on the Dakota plains. Then she stepped into the storm. The wind grabbed her instantly, pulling at her coat like hungry hands. Snow stung her face like needles. She could not see 1 foot ahead of her. But Mutha Cullah did not turn back. Mutha walked with her head down, fighting the wind that tried to knock her flat. Her legs remembered this fight. Her feet found the trail even when her eyes saw only white. After 2 hours, she heard something. A weak cry almost swallowed by the wind. She followed it, pushing through snow up to her knees. There they were, 15 men huddled in a shallow ravine, pressed against the cattle for warmth. Some boys were shaking so hard they could barely hold still. Sullah's refketi sat with his back against a frozen rock, his lips blue, his pride gone completely. "Mrs. Cullah," Jade Turner stared at her like she was a ghost. How did you find us?" Mother did not answer his question. There was no time for talk. "Get up," she said sharply. "All of you now." Nobody argued. Nobody laughed at her this time. She showed them how to pack snow into hard walls to block the wind, just like her husband once taught her. She pushed the cattle into a tight circle. She knelt beside a boy whose fingers had turned white and hard. "Don't put them near the fire," she warned, grabbing his wrist before he could move closer to the flames. "You'll lose your fingers that way. Rub them slow like this." She fed them dried meat from her pack. She kept talking to them, kept shaking their shoulders when their eyes grew heavy. "Stay awake," she said again and again. "Sleep here and you won't wake up." Sullers watched her from his blankets, shame written across his frozen face. "Why?" he whispered. "Why did you come for men who never once respected you?" Mutha looked at him steadily, snow still clinging to her eyebrows. "A cook feeds the body," she said. "But I was a wife who learned to survive storms like this one. I never stopped being her. You just never looked." All through the night, she kept them moving, kept them talking, kept them alive. When dawn finally broke, weak and gray over the ravine, every single man was still breathing. The men rode back into Hollow Ridge half frozen, but alive. Word spread fast. By noon, people from Miller's Crossing came just to see the cook who had walked into a killing storm and lived. Sullers Refkdi called everyone into the barn. He stood where he once mocked Mutha, but this time his voice shook. "This woman," he said, pointing at Mutha, who stood quietly with her apron still tied at her waist, "saved every life on this ranch." The men went silent, waiting. "I called her only a cook," Sullers said, his voice breaking. "I was wrong. She is the bravest soul that has ever walked this land." Jade Turner stepped forward, removing his hat. "Mrs. Cullah, I owe you my life. I'm sorry for every laugh, every word." Mutha said nothing at first. She looked around at the faces that once mocked her, now staring back with shame and wonder. "I didn't do it for thanks," she finally said. "I did it because nobody else would." Nobody laughed this time. Nobody called her Old Mutha ever again. From that day, everything changed. The cowboys asked her about the sky before every drive. When Mutha said storm, they stayed. When she said ride, they rode without fear. Sullers raised her wages. He gave her the best room in the main house, far from the small kitchen corner she once slept in. One evening, months later, a young cowboy named Tommy found her sitting on the porch, watching clouds move across the sky. "Mrs. Cullah," he asked, "how did you know? How did you know the storm was coming?" Mutha smiled, her eyes soft with memory. "The wind told me," she said, "and I finally had someone willing to listen." Tommy sat beside her, quiet and thoughtful, watching the same sky she watched. Years passed. Ranchers across the county told her story again and again, from campfire to campfire, from barn to barn. They said a cook once saved 15 men and 300 cattle in a blizzard that should have killed them all. But she was never just a cook. She was Mutha Cullah, the woman the storm remembered.